Okay, let's take a look at this question called dominoes. And we see how we can do this question with simple formulas in Excel. So as usual, start by reading this required. And just a tip here, the place where people usually lose marks or usually the person you thought was going to win the competition doesn't win the competition is usually that they misunderstood the question. In the live volleyball question I did on YouTube, I didn't fully understand the prompt that was given to me, and in question 3 and 4 of the competition I had to go back and reread the question because I wasn't quite sure, and that is one of the reasons I didn't win that competition and I came second. And I've seen that a lot of time also, people like Dermot Early and Renier, when they do questions on YouTube, if they misunderstand a question, it's sort of they lost the competition already. Okay, so in a competition, always make sure you carefully read this information that's given to you and know exactly what is required of you. So they're telling us the two players are playing a game of dominoes. At the beginning of the game, each player is dealt 7 domino tiles, which means that the first 14 tiles in a sequence is dealt to players. So here's all the dominoes that is being used. So what I can now do is, just to understand, is I'm just going to drag this across and take all the dominoes, and then down here there is a count, okay, and it says count 28. So I know that 28 tiles is given to me, but only the first 14, only everything up until that point over there, the first 14 of each game is going to be used, is going to be dealt to the players. A tile that has the same number of pips on either side is called a double. Calculate the total number of pips on the doubles, only the doubles, that are in the hands of both players at the beginning of the game. So as I understand it, all the dominoes that are down here is split sort of into 2 categories. There is the doubles, which is these. So there's 1 on both sides, 2 on both sides, 3 on both sides. And then all the rest of the, the mixed pips is the not doubles. So if I just go down here and I say I want to calculate this first round's answer, I would say, okay, for this domino, don't count anything because it's not a double. This is a double, so 6. This is a double, so 10. So we're on a total of 16. Disregard that one, it's not a double, not a double, not a double, not a double. Here's 2 again, so we're at 18. Okay, so that's sort of what we need to do. So we need to calculate the total number of pips on only the doubles that are in the hands of both players, meaning only this yellow highlighted bit. Because remember, only the first 14 was dealt out to players, is in the hands of both players. So now how I want to attempt this question is by first being able to see, I first need to test, is one of these a double? So what you could do is you could come in here and you could delete everything that's not a double, but that sort of wastes time, because if I take this list of all the possible doubles and I just write next to it how much, what's the sort of score of it, I would say that that has 2 pips, that has 4, 6, 8, 10, and 12 pips each, okay? Because remember, 2 because one on both sides. What I can now do is I can say, Excel, go down this list and take each domino and look it up in this little thing. Okay, so see if this domino is on this left side. If it is on this left side, add this number, whatever number corresponds to it. Add that number to the total. Obviously, all the non-doubles is not on this list. So if it gets to a non-double, it will just output 0. And that's exactly what I want. Okay, so that's sort of now my game plan. I'm going to go down this list. It's going to look up the dominoes in this little block. Let's just make it a different color. So it's going to look it up in this block. If it finds it in this block, it's going to obviously add the number. And if it's not there, it should add 0. So let's take a look at a few formulas that people can use to do this type of question. The first one is called VLOOKUP, and it's a very common formula, but it is a formula that I have started not using that much. Also, many of the people doing the competition have stopped using VLOOKUP. Because there is a better alternative. But let's start with VLOOKUP. What VLOOKUP does is it's a formula that takes an input like this D, and I essentially ask it, look up D, look it up in this table, and output something for me. So if I want to say, look up D in this left-hand column, which would be way at the bottom over here, and output the name column, so output Toby for me. Okay, so I would say VLOOKUP. What's the lookup value is this D. What's the table? Then you select the entire table, okay? Because how VLOOKUP works, it always looks at the left-handmost column, and it looks up this value in the left-handmost column, okay? What should it output? Column index. Well, it should not output this first column. It should output column 1, 2, 3. This yellow one is the third column, so I just put in 3 in my formula. And because this first column where it's going to look it up is not in order, it's not A, B, C, D, it's a bit out of order, I have to put false to say it has to look at the exact match. Okay. If I do that, it'll output the name Toby down here. And now that's cool. If I want to know who is H, it will say H is Stanley because H over there is Stanley. It's very nice. We can use this and say look up the dominoes and output the number. This does have a few drawbacks. Like I said, if this is not in order and you forget to add this false at the end, okay, it will sometimes mess up because H is, it says H, but now it's outputting Michael, which is there where B is. Okay, so it's giving us the wrong answer because we forgot to say it should be exact, to say H is Stanley. Okay, so it does come with a few limitations, and the other limitation is it always looks up in the left-handmost column. Okay, so it was replaced with what's called XLOOKUP. So in XLOOKUP, it doesn't matter if we have a table, because what XLOOKUP does is I can say XLOOKUP, what's the lookup value? I want to look up D. Where should I look it up? No, look it up just in this column and output this column. And if I do that, it'll always give me the right answer. D is Toby and H will be Stanley. Okay. The benefits of this is I don't have to worry about that true or false at the end because the default of XLOOKUP is to be exact. So it is to be false at the end. And the other nice thing is that this doesn't have to be, it doesn't have to be aligned at all. So this formula now, it looks up this red block and it outputs this yellow block, but they are not on the same row. As long as these arrays are the same length, it will always work. And it will even work if this is on the left side. Okay. Remember, with VLOOKUP, it will always look up the left-handmost column. In XLOOKUP, I can tell it, please now look at the green column and output the yellow column, even though the green column is to the right. So if I accidentally, because I'm stressed in a competition, accidentally did it like that, my VLOOKUP will suddenly not work, and you will spend time diagnosing why it won't work. So I tend to default to use XLOOKUP just because it's a bit more user-friendly. The last thing is a formula called IFERROR. So let's quickly take a look at XLOOKUP. Okay. So this is the plan now. We're going to use XLOOKUP, and on these letters is going to be each domino. And when we look up that domino, it's going to output the number. But remember the non-doubles. These dominoes are just these dominoes are the doubles. What if we output a not double, something that's not on this list? Well, let's try that. Let's output Z. So Z is not on this list, and we see it throws an error. Okay, so when this XLOOKUP formula throws an error, I want it to output the number 0, because like we said, it should then not count anything. So that's where IFERROR comes in. What IFERROR does is, if I say IFERROR, if this cell is an error, it should output the number 0. If it's not an error, it's going to output the value of the cell. So in this case, it's going to output 4 because it's not an error. But all three of these is different types of errors in Excel. And if I drag it down, you'll see each of them outputs the number 0. So what that allows me to do in this XLOOKUP is to say, I'm going to wrap this XLOOKUP in an if error. Okay, so I'm wrapping the XLOOKUP in an if error and saying if it's an error, output 0. So in Z in this case, because it's not here, it threw an error, but then it just displays the number 0. If I put E in, it's not going to be an error and it's going to show Pam. So that's essentially how I'm going to do this question. So let's get started. Usually what I do in this case is I'm going to use all this real estate here to the right hand side of the question. So I usually start by just copying this top header over. It just helps me to know where I can work, so I don't copy something out to infinity. And then let's start writing our formula. So let's start with this example one. If we get 26, we know our formula is working. So I'm going to start in that block and I'm going to say equal XLOOKUP. Right, XLOOKUP, look up that domino value, and please look it up for me in this column, and remember to press F4 to lock the column, because as I copy this formula down, this blue block is also going to move down, but I don't want this block up here to move down. It should always stay there. So if you press F4 and it gets this little dollar sign, it'll stay there. And then return this one, also press F4 to lock it. Okay. So that's the XLOOKUP. It's awesome. It says the first one is a 6, and if we zoom in, we see, it is a 6. Cool. Okay. But remember, now if we just copy this thing across, it's going to throw a bunch of errors where all the non-doubles are. So we need to wrap it in an if error and say, if it is an error, please output 0. And now if I copy this thing across, you'll see it output 6, 0 because it's not a double, not a double, not a double. There's a double and it's an 8. Okay, so now suddenly I have all the scores. And my answer over here is going to be the total of the first 14, remember? So let's do that. Let's choose the first 14. I'm going to move this to the side until the countdown here says 14. That's the ones I'm going to sum. So let's quickly say sum, meaning count up the total of this yellow block. It outputs 26, and the example's answer is 26. So we are on track. So now you can simply take this formula and copy it all the way down. It automatically calculates all the values here. And now you can simply say this answer is equal to all these sums we calculated. And if we did it correctly, we did. You'll see all of these shows us green. So remember, in a competition, there's not going to be this thing indicating you did an answer correctly or not. You're going to work like that in the blind. But if this first one is correct, 9 out of 10 times, you'll get your answers here. But for this question, we know we now did everything right. So that is how you can use VLOOKUP. So you could have used VLOOKUP up here, but you should have just been very careful to make sure you're looking up in the left-handmost column and you have that false at the end. I just use XLOOKUP up here to look up the scores for each of these dominoes and then count it up using sum the first 14. And for the non-doubles, I used an if error to output 0 to get the answer for this question dominoes.